So what are we learning today, Bill?
All right, we're going to call the work session into session. So we're going to start with morning calisthenics. Lisa's going to lead.
All right, everybody up. Good morning, Lisa Barrett with Manatee County Building and Development Services. This morning I have Josh Dan and Kirsten French here today to present to you a proposed Land Development Code text amendment to add accessory dwelling units to our Land Development Code. And I don't think Josh and Kirsten have presented before the Planning Commission. They've been here since August. They both started around the same, actually on the same week. Kirsten went to Ohio State and University of North Carolina. And Josh went to Chico State and worked in California before coming to Manatee County. So we're happy to have them, and I'm excited to have them help me with code and comprehensive plan amendments. And I'm sure you'll see them reviewing some site plans as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. As was mentioned, my name is Josh Dan, and this is Kirsten French. We bring before your commission this morning the accessory dwelling units as a proposed LDC text amendment. Let me see if I can figure this out. The direction for this project came out of a recognition that housing within Manatee County was unaffordable. So this slide demonstrates some of the data collected from the Schimberg data list, as well as from our Manatee County Redevelopment and Economic Opportunity Department. It shows some of the household income in comparison to the single-family home costs on average, I guess a median home cost within Manatee County. Some of these figures are unattainable to a lot of people working within Manatee County. It's a bit unaffordable for them to live in the county that they work in. Kirsten, would you like to explain this one a little bit?
The U.S. Census collects data now on housing form. What we've got going on in Manatee County is it's majority single family in different forms. 58% is single family detached. Then we have mobile homes. Then the blue you see is single family attached, which is a little bit different than our definitions in Manatee. It's generalized for the U.S. Then we have several sections of multifamily at the end, from like 4 dwelling units in a single unit, up to a very large scale box multifamily development. So what this is both a piece of evidence that we have a lot of one kind of housing. There's a lot of missing middle housing, but it's also our opportunity to use accessory dwelling units to solve the problem.
The census data that it says estimated, what
Correct.
year was the base data?
2017, and it's 5-year data, so it's more accurate.
Thank you.
So we've asked ourselves, what do we do? The county has implemented some tools to address this issue. Adding accessory dwelling units to the Land Development Code is one of those tools, and that's some of the research that we've been tasked with. A lot of this came out of the December 12th, 2017 Board of County Commissioners meeting, where they accepted an Affordable Housing Committee's recommendation regarding affordable housing. And one of the, what was it? It was one of the key items in there was adding accessory dwelling units to our LDC. And since that time, staff has worked to research as well as draft language for this. Staff held a work session with the Board of County Commissioners on December 11th of 2018. And I believe the work session was beneficial. Some of the information that was provided to the board was the need for affordable housing, a background on the ADU initiative, some of the research that we had conducted and the draft language and concerns from the public that we had received in our process leading up to that work session. The key takeaways that we received from the commission was to continue researching other agencies that neighbor us to the north and the south, but to try to formulate an ordinance that was unique to Manatee County. They wanted to also try to retain neighborhood integrity and strongly promote privacy between ADUs and neighboring properties. Staff has worked to address those concerns as well as revise the draft ordinance with a few versions. We performed some analysis regarding setbacks and ADUs and their impacts countywide. And we've also routed the draft language amongst the different departments and agencies within the county to receive their feedback on the draft language. Here are some examples, primarily throughout Bradenton. They were closest to our offices here. As you can see, this is an accessory dwelling unit in a rear yard of a home above a garage. Here's another example. We feel this one could prove beneficial in promoting this, as it's actually quite hidden from view from the street. They're more often tucked away and not entirely visible. And then I believe this is our last slide for pictures taken locally. Here's another one. This appears to be above a garage as well, in a backyard at the end of a driveway. No, I'm sorry, one last one. Again, above garage. That seems to be a popular one for some of the older styles that had existed in the area. Some of the research, like I had explained, that staff had conducted was reaching out to neighboring jurisdictions, trying to see what they had implemented, some of the hurdles that they had run into. We tried to communicate as often as we could with some of those agencies and their staff. We performed some spatial analysis regarding public transit and the neighborhoods and communities throughout the county. And we revised the ordinance addressing some of the concerns from the work session. Staff found that according to a lot of the input that we received from the public, ADUs were quite popular and wanted to be county-wide, not just initially our thought of the urban service area. So we revised our draft ordinance to allow ADUs county-wide in the following zones: A, A1, all RSF zones, and village zoning. Here's some of the spatial analysis that was conducted with regard to public transit. The dots, although they may be hard to see, are bus stops throughout the county, and the light green buffer around them is a half-mile radius from each bus stop. We show that this proves beneficial to folks who want to put in ADUs, because this could limit some of the parking requirements, which are often costly to people wanting to add these, and ADUs being an opportunity for, let's say, adult children who can't afford to rent right now, that are still living at home, can possibly pay lower rent in an ADU, or also for elderly parents that want to age in place who probably don't drive and will be picked up or taking public transit. Excuse me. Our goals for this proposal was to create ordinance language that is sufficiently regulatory as to provide privacy and stability to neighborhoods, as we were directed from that work session. We feel that we've done so by discussing or primarily bringing about an understanding with setbacks, height limitation, depending on how close you are to your rear yards, and side yard setbacks. And we also tried to limit the ordinance to a short ordinance so that it wasn't overbearing or overly restrictive to the public. We wanted to make this by right within the permitted zones. and easier for the public to come in and pull permits without an extensive review period. Here's some kind of drafted or drawn examples that we had found. These are some of the most common types of ADUs. As you can see, there's the attached ADU, the detached above garage, and then just detached single story. To the right of the images, we've provided a definition that we've worked on. I think that is beneficial to the county as a whole, and I'll read that out loud for us. We define it as an attached or detached residential dwelling unit with cooking and bathroom facilities, which is subordinate and separate from the primary dwelling unit. It may be used as a rental, but may not be sold separately from the primary dwelling. A mobile home shall not be deemed an accessory dwelling unit. To the right of this slide, you see some of our draft language. I believe that's available to you in your packet. As I had mentioned, we hope to keep this as short as possible and easy to read. It's really separated into two sections, the intent and purpose in the first half, and then the second half being 511.18b, the development standards, which would go into greater detail for setbacks and placement of ADUs, as well as describing privacy. And I'll let Kirsten jump into some description of that for you.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to skip to. So we've got several different. I'm moving back. Several different measures to address some of the things we've heard. We've got one. I think the biggest piece that restricts or regulates an accessory dwelling unit is its size. Your size is going to be limited to 80% of your primary dwelling unit, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is largest, right? Yeah. Oh, whichever is less. Yeah, that's what you want. So your maximum hard cap is 1,000 square feet for an accessory dwelling unit. As we looked at these different types, your attached is going to follow. It must follow your main setbacks. The setbacks that are already designated by your underlying zoning. The detached model must be a single story, and then we'll talk about reduced setbacks in a moment. There are some extra restrictions for that. And then anything that's above a garage must be to the rear or lined in line with the front facade of the house. If the garage is in front of the main part of the house, then you would not be permitted to put an accessory dwelling unit over that. So we're going to go on into.
You say if the garage is in front, if it's.
Yeah, if it's front loaded.
Example showed that it was, they were parallel to the main structure.
If it's parallel, you can do it. Okay. If it's, I don't know, posterior to, you cannot. Anterior to, yeah, that's probably right. Okay, so. I'm gonna show you what we've done with the reduced rear setbacks, and the goal of the ordinance, like we said, was to allow some flexibility. Basically, we want people to be able to choose at least one of these structures. For most people to be able to access either a detached above a garage or a detached model. So reducing the setbacks might help with some lots. This is just an example of all of our zoning districts that this is going to be allowed. What we have here is in black, you see your district standards. Generally, you have a rear yard setback of 20 feet and a side yard setback of something like 8 to 10 feet. This is the RSF 4.5, so it's 20 and 8. And for this, what we would do is allow above garage ADUs to go to 15 feet. In exchange for certain privacy measures. And then if you were in a single-story detached ADU, you could go to 10 feet, again, in exchange for some privacy measures. Notice that if you built your accessory dwelling unit at 20 feet, you would not be subject to those additional restrictions because you could technically extend your primary dwelling unit back there, and we can't really regulate that. is the idea. Okay, so we've got a case study of, this happens to be in Whitfield. We've selected 8 lots. This is between Montgomery Avenue and Lantana Avenue, and taken these lots and transformed them exactly into this model, and then the pink shows fictional accessory dwelling units and how this ordinance might actually play out in the real world. So what I have here is a detached single-story model that goes to the 10-foot setback and has to comply with reduced height limitations. In order to get that 10-foot setback, you can't go to the 35-foot maximum that you're actually allowed. You'd have to be capped at 12 feet at the gable. And then any windows that are facing, wherever you cross the setback line, any windows facing a neighbor will have to be either opaqued, so you can't see through them, light can come in, but you can't see out, or you would have to put some foliage to screen, or there would have to be a fence. The fence I drew here is 6 feet, just for measure. This is what that same model would look like from the rear yard. This is an attached accessory dwelling unit, and like I said, the attached is going to just follow the same standards that the main building would. So hopefully it blends into the structure. If the primary dwelling could go to 35 feet and did go to 35 feet, the accessory dwelling unit could do that too, just like any kind of addition you put on your house. Although that's not really common here in Manatee County. This is an example of an accessory dwelling unit going to the maximum square footage that it's allowed, which in this case is 1,000 square feet. This one's also at a 20-foot setback. And like I said, this will not have to follow rear screening requirements. This model happens to be just naturally kind of oriented away from neighbors for privacy. There's some people talking about building housing for students all the way as small as 160 square feet, so I just wanted to show what that looked like. In Whitfield, it's not much more intrusive than a regular shed.
Music.
And so this is, actually I was wrong. I thought that, I was pretty sure that these above garage units were not very common in Whitfield, but there are some across 41 closer to closer to the shore. But this is an example where they have gone to the 15-foot setback and they are reduced in height to, they can't go to 35 feet. We don't allow you to have any more than 1 story above the garage. And then this would have to provide additional screening or opaque the windows. This might be your scariest case scenario, I don't know. But we've heard back from neighbors that these exist and they're not bothering them. So that was good feedback. Okay.
Yeah, so some of our next steps will be as follows within the timeline here. We're hoping to receive approval from the board and codification, but here's the timeline of our next meetings. We have our work session with your commission today, planning task force on the 27th of this month. We come back to you all in April on the 11th, and then first board meeting in May on the 2nd, second board meeting in June on the 20th. Thank you for letting us present to you today.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. You mentioned that you had met with many departments. Was the emergency service folks, were they involved in the discussions?
They were routed some of the draft ordinance language, and they provided some feedback as well.
So is there allowance, well, I presume it's probably per the building code, but I know there always are concerns with regard to building separation and
yes,
fire resistance of structures. And
that's true, and that's something that we addressed within our draft ordinance. Within the second section, 511.18b, the development standards, the first line states, accessory dwelling units shall be subordinate to the primary dwelling and shall meet all applicable requirements of the LDC. That's something that we've been trying to stress at our meetings and with any of the folks that we meet from the public, that, you know, it's in their best interest to get in touch with utilities, all the other departments, to try to find out what they might run into, what requirement or standard they would have to meet.
Okay, and then architecturally, is there allowances that the architectural character of the accessory unit be consistent with the primary structure?
I don't think we got that restrictive in requiring it to meet exact architectural design requirement as the primary structure. But we did describe a need for privacy inward, so that's about as descriptive in that manner.
Yeah, if I may, for a second.
Sure.
I looked around at Bradenton, St. Pete, Sarasota County, Sarasota City to see what kind of language that they were using. And there is sometimes language like must match or must correspond to. It's very general, and it seemed like it would be a hard thing to enforce. I recognize that it's in everybody's interest to have something blending in, but we saw those examples, and not all of those matched the primary, but they made sense. You know, they fit with them. So it's just a hard thing to give to somebody who's enforcing code.
Right.
Does this look right to you? You know.
Right.
So there was that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Mr. Rutledge.
So thanks for this. I think this is a very forward-looking idea, and I'm a big fan of it. And so I have a couple of questions. It comes to design, but also kind of delivery. So have you looked at the product that's available for delivery by Amazon?
No, but we do know that quite a few prefabbed kits do exist out there.
So it seems to me that they are promoting this particular product. They have 4 or 5 configurations. It would be very interesting to know whether somebody could order those and have them delivered. I've looked at this. So I think you need to have that somehow in your mind and have that addressed, because failing to do that kind of might be something you have to look at later. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, that is a great point. I think a lot of that falls under the requirement to pull building permits, like any kind of modular or manufactured
But if
structure.
you leave it up to somebody when they come in, everybody does it themselves, okay? So here is a product that's nationally delivered, has all these components, has variety of things, not necessarily bathroom and kitchen, but they're a modular unit. So I would recommend that you look at those and say, look, we've looked at these and these are applicable, because you've already got something that people can deliver, they might do readily and might ramp up the process, opposed to every single person come in and say, well, I bought a TED shed and I want to put a bathroom in it. So
Sure.
I would have you look at it, that's all.
We will. We just know it's the interest of the building department to review plan sets to ensure that they meet the intent of the building code.
But we could do that in advance, that's my point.
Right.
Secondly, how does your description here relate to tiny homes? There's several people that develop them in the county here. What's your statement on tiny homes to these?
A lot of the difference between tiny homes and ADUs is that tiny homes are still kind of on a trailer frame. They can be moved around or towed by vehicle. ADUs would have to be set similar to the primary structure on a foundation. They're not the similar understanding. That's some of the, I guess, ideas or the concerns that we're receiving from people, is that they're the same thing, and they truly are not.
So, but my point is this, and I think your comment's right. Some people think of those as an adjunct home environment of some sort. And the fact that you say it's not a trailer, I can tell you a friend of mine tried to develop in St. Pete a tiny home model as a replacement for a mobile home park, because it's much more contemporary, it's a little smaller, it's a new environment for people on an economic budget. The fact that there was no integration, there's no way to figure that out, they gave up. And I don't think we ought to be that. I think we have, like I live on a half acre. I think you ought to think about people who have larger than typical lots, because there's a lot of 5-acre sites that were developed, even on the east side, then certainly on the west side. So I would like you to at least consider that tiny homes are a part of this kind of module, which is an additional living environment that doesn't need a traditional lot.
Well, anyone wanting to, I think, submit for a PD could technically provide plans or development for a tiny home community. That would still have to go through the process. This would not allow for that. We do understand what you're saying, and it's something we'll look into.
I just think we're making this change because what we're trying to do is make affordable living. If we go back to the premise, what are you doing here? Well, you've stepped into it, which I like.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, you're almost halfway there. There's another option. The last thing I wanted to mention is there's also a group in Tampa that's developing container homes. There's several of them being delivered. I think that goes back to the question of architectural. So I guess I like this so much. And there's one way, which is you stick your toe in and see what happens. But I think there's so much more that this is a part of and will come up anyway. I think it might be prudent to think about those today and at least have a comment about them.
Sure.
Not just that we hear about them. Because I think you would serve yourself well in the community if you were able to say, and we looked at this, this, and this. If I know about them, which is probably the lowest level of the evolutionary scale,
Right.
other people know about it. Right?
Well, I think one thing that came up from an individual that was extremely interested in container homes in the community and wanting to see containers, shipping containers specifically written in the ordinance, we felt that although containers now are very popular, maybe in 10 years there's another type of structure that will come about that we don't know of yet that will be popular as well, and it's not specifically described in the code. So we allow, the way it's written now, the ingenuity and the great idea to come from the public, and then it'll go through the building permitting process, and they'll see if it meets the intent of the Florida Building Code, and then they'll allow certain types of structures.
But you missed my point, which is this. We're trying to make an efficient government model.
Sure.
We want to be effective. We want this to happen. I mean, you're going through all this effort because you want it to occur. If you send every single individual one there without any sense of, we know there are these typical modules that we could sign off on, they still have to meet plumbing inspections, still have to have whatever requirements you say. But if you don't do that, you just throw everybody back in line, and now there's 100, 1,500, 10,000 people who want to do it, and they all go in line just like before, and they have no clarity. I send it to your consideration, that's all.
I think Mr. Barnott had a point, and then Mr. Ron, I believe you had a comment.
All good suggestions and comments, Paul. No, there's no however. You integrate the Florida Building Code and the state of Florida. When you look at a modular, everything on the inside of a modular or a mobile home is inspected by the state. Now, they certify that it meets the building code. The only thing that we do at a local jurisdiction is to ensure that both are properly attached to the ground, so they meet the wind load and things like that. So I'm going to go back to your tiny homes. A tiny home, is it a tiny home on wheels, or is it an RV? If it's an RV, then it'd be inspected by the state. If it's not, then it's a tiny home on a trailer. It would be required to be fixed to the ground properly, with straps or whatever to meet the wind load. So I don't think we're restricting tiny homes as an ADU. I'm not sure that we're restricting container homes. As long as they're engineered, okay. And I think we've got a company that's moving into Manatee County that is going to manufacture container homes or whatever. There's already some people doing it. We're working with Manatee Tech to look at how they can create container homes and us do the inspections on them, pick them up, take them to the job site, fix them to the ground. So, I think we've hit the mark.
Okay.
Based on what you said.
You and I talked about this. Efficiency and ease of conduct is worth tons of money. And if these are tax opportunities, right, there's going to be some taxable income, correct?
Sure.
If you could get 1,000 of them done this year versus 100, it's a benefit. And you've given all these places a home. Like I've got an ailing mother-in-law. I could see this absolutely. I'd like to order it from Amazon because I use my credit card. I just think it's just there's some vehicles that we could consider that you might expedite the process. I might be wrong.
So one
This
vehicle that
Amazon
we've
thing,
been,
I don't know, what is that? I've never heard of that before.
Get on the web, bruh.
My wife is the Amazon person, not me.
I'm looking at a project where this pricing and home conditions, all the stuff that we want, we're trying to integrate it into the program. And so in doing that, one of the things that somebody mentioned to me is that you can go look up, and they have, quote, tiny homes for sale. And they're small or whatever, but they deliver them for about X number of dollars. So I just think it's something, if you could say, yeah, that meets the code, I don't know if you can.
so
You
also
could.
to answer that question further about efficiency and being an effective government, I think this might take a little more time than just passing the ordinance, but we'd also like to be able to give some design guidance to people. So while this is short and open, we'd like to show people in a separate document that's not codified, this, and this, shipping containers, homes of this type, homes of this structure, these Amazon models, et cetera, these all fit the code. And we'll do that analysis for you, and you'll have that information in front of you as you're trying to figure this process out.
Very good. Mr. Rowan.
Good morning. Hey, I'm 100% for this. I think it's great. I think we need this to affect the affordability issue in Manatee County. My question is, I don't know if we can enforce this, or we can or cannot, or it's code enforcement or whatever, but in Sarasota County with their ADUs right now, they're struggling with the weekly rentals type, Airbnb type thing that's happening down there. So is there something that we can write into the new code where we can prevent that as far as weekly rentals? What's happening down there is that someone has a detached garage with something above it, and they're renting out weekly. It's not neighborhood compatible. People are coming in and out all the time, and it's starting to affect neighborhoods down there. So I like the rental intent where it's a student or it's your kid comes back from college, can't get a job, can live outside the main structure or whatever it is. But is there any way we can build that into that, or is it something that we can't control and it's a cordon for? Yes, sir.
Mr. Barnott.
The state doesn't allow you to regulate short-term rentals.
Okay.
So no.
Answer that.
I think there's quite a few things that we have to navigate state statute through. I know if you bring in something on wheels, and I think the state has a definition how long it can sit on those wheels before it's considered a mobile home or whatever. I can't remember. We went through that a couple of years ago. And so that's probably one of the things that I'm sure the staff struggled with, is trying to make sure that it fit within the framework of the state statute.
Yeah, one of the things, we need to do some research on this Amazon thing.
I
just made it up.
I think Paul.
Where is it built? Has it been inspected? Is it allowable in the state
I
of
think
Florida?
How about a 3D?
Paul's trying to make people live in cardboard boxes. I think that's what he.
I do have a few for sale now.
He did mention a mother-in-law, I think.
I just want to get one.
Mr. Spock.
When you're talking about setbacks, and I might have been reading something and you've already addressed it, but everything you've been talking about is either adjacent to or behind the properties. If you're in East County and like I'm on an acre and I've got 100 feet of setback on the front of my property, can a unit be so long as it meets all the setbacks on the property? Can that unit be placed on the front of the property instead of behind? I didn't see where it was really addressed in the language.
To that point.
No, yeah, it's the difficulty of writing a code for the entire county, and it's got to be hidden from your neighbors. So that's.
I would argue that that's an appropriate consideration. If
we're talking East County when
if it's an A zoning.
Yeah, I'm an A zone.
So that may be something you look into. If it's an A zoning, it would allow it, because a lot of the homes that are on A zoning are going to be pushed all the way to the back. So they have
You're thinking of a structure that's like all the way to its rear setback, and you have all the front setback.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
And we're essentially on the back third of our acre. I've got a 125-foot long driveway, and up until we started kicking this idea around on affordable housing in 2015, I think, when the committee was kicking this idea around, and I immediately thought how great it would be to have a detached garage with a second floor apartment in the, as part of my driveway entrance. I mean, it would definitely fit into the atmosphere of our area. And as to the Amazon thing, that's something that we, when this gets passed and promoted, we definitely need to be able to make the county, our county residents understand, don't pre-buy something and then put it in for application. You spend $7,000 on a pre-built structure and find out that it's not code compliant and can't be returned. There's going to be a lot of unhappy people out there.
That concerns me.
That's a major concern. Our building code's designed to keep people safe in Florida, and it's critical that we respect our code above people's convenience.
All right.
I understand what you're saying about A1. We need to take a look at that. We'll do that.
Outstanding.
Because that makes sense. You look at a lot of A1 zoning, and I've been to your house.
Yeah.
I know. So, you've got a lot of room out front, but you put the house all the way on the back. So
right.
Makes sense in an A or A1 or any parcel, an acre or larger. I don't know. It's worth looking at.
Appreciate it.
And a couple other thoughts I had, parking and then existing HOAs or associations where they may have restrictions. Have there been any thoughts on, I'm sure you've thought about parking. I'm sure that was one of the major topics of discussion, but with regard to existing associations that may have restrictions.
Yeah, we have. As far as parking goes, some of the spatial analysis that was provided was any parcel within half mile of public transit, like a bus stop, would not be required to place additional parking, as long as, say, if they have a large enough driveway, they were able to meet parking requirements for their, their home, plus the addition of the ADU. They were not required to add another driveway or requirement for parking. If they are in an area outside of that buffer, the half mile from a public transit, then yes, they would be required to on their plan, show additional parking. As far as homeowners associations or some of the communities out east, I believe a majority of them fall under the PD zoning. They would have to come back to the board for a change to their plan to allow ADUs.
All right, and we're going to we have to get ready for the other meeting, so we're going to have a hard break here. So interesting subject. I think everybody agrees that there's a lot of value in that. I support the idea. So when it comes back to us, I'm sure there's going to be additional discussion. So we're going to have to break right now. So I'm going to close the work session and get ready for the upcoming public hearings.
Before you do that, you want to take any public comment?
Work session, I don't know, do we have to have public comment on the work session?
Usually does.
Okay, all right. So we're going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward and make a comment on this work session? If you are not prepared now, of course, we'll have opportunities in the future when it's heard in the public hearings.
That's what it says.
Okay, seeing no one come forward, we're going to close the public comment, and we're also going to close the work session. Thanks.
Thank you.